Well, hello. I'm Wayne Hutchison. I'm one of the members of the competition committee at the Major Series, and the intent of this video is to give you a brief primer on the Silver Crown car, um, what it's about, a little bit about how to set it up, and a little bit of information on where to drive it, what racing lines to use here at IRP. I run this car every week in the official series on iRacing, as do a couple other drivers in the major series. So you can always reach out to me for with questions during the next couple of weeks here, and then hopefully this video will help you survive this race and maybe even have some success. So basically, the Silver Crown is a high horsepower, low weight, small tired car. It's a V8 engine burning methanol, 820 some odd horsepower, about 1,200 pounds without fuel. So it's very similar to a Formula One car in the power to weight ratio, just not quite the same aerodynamics and not quite as sophisticated from a powertrain and suspension aspect. Front engine, so and with the fuel behind the driver over the rear axle, or behind the rear axle even. So the amount of fuel has a big impact on how the car handles. As the fuel burns off, the car tends to get tighter and tighter. Let's take a quick look at the garage here. We can run through some things. It's pretty simple. I've loaded up a setup here. This is the Baseline Plus setup. Call it Silver Crown IRP low cross weight soft spring race setup. You can see here we have tire pressures. Basically, you want to set the tire pressures a little lower on the left-hand side than the right. Typical for oval track racing. Then what split you use is kind of up to you. You want to use a little higher pressure for short runs like qualifying, a little lower pressure for the longer runs. The races are 100 laps, so you don't want the tires to get too much pressure. Remember that pressure is essentially spring rate, so the lower the pressure, the softer the spring rate of the tires, and very much like changing the springs on the corner of the car. So you can always adjust pressures to help with handling. If you try to adjust pressures to get a kind of a constant temperature, even in the inside and middle, or like you would try to do on some other cars, you might struggle. This tire model and this tire carcass shape makes it really hard to get that shape to happen. You tend to always have the middle temperature higher than you'd like. If you really want to get it down there, you're gonna have to run really low cold pressures, and then maybe you can do that, but it makes the car really a handful on when the tires are cold, because they kind of wallows around on you. So you probably don't want to do that unless you're very experienced. On the right hand side, you have the stagger adjustments here, front and rear. Rear stagger, you can go from 0 to 4 inches of stagger, so the outside tire being larger than the inside, and basically that's to control your drive off under throttle. The more stagger you have, the more the car will turn on throttle. On the front, you can put stagger into it. It will affect how the car turns under braking. Minimally, because at IRP there's not a lot of braking. You might be 20% on the brakes at the hardest, so it doesn't have much impact. But adding staggered, of course, does lift up the side of the car because the tire gets bigger, so that side of the car lifts up, and it does have the effect of increasing the camber, which can be helpful to get more camber, give you a little bit more camber thrust or side bite when you're going through the corners. So that's pretty much it for the tires menu. Go to the chassis, it's very simple. Basically you've got a spring and a shock on each corner. You can set up the car kind of any way you want. This one I've got set up with very soft front springs, hence the soft spring nomenclature in the title, and relatively soft rear springs. You can't go any lower than 250 pounds per inch. You can go all the way to 1,000. This one's set very soft, which helps beginning drivers be able to handle the car, because any changes in direction tend to be a little bit slower, a little bit easier to catch than with the stiffer springs. And this car, when you get on the throttle, has a lot of horsepower, a lot of torque, and it will change direction rapidly. Yeah. Typical setup for this car is, we find, is typically try to get the nose down as low as you can get it. So I've got the ride height down here, 104. You can't go much lower without going red. And then the rear you want to try and get fairly high. You can go really high by running the shock collar offsets down to 0, which will get the back end up as high as possible, but then you lose weight jacker adjustment because you've obviously got your shock collar all the way to one extreme, so you've lost some adjustment in the one direction. So I like to run something like this, so I've still got some weight jacker adjustment during the race to be able to control my cross weight. I always typically start the race with the weight jacker at 0 at this track anyway. You also have some camber adjustment in the front. I've got it maxed out at plus and minus 2.5. It won't go anymore with this configuration. And caster is to your liking. Usually there's a caster split. Doesn't have to be, but oftentimes you have more caster on the outside, on the right side, to help the car turn in a little bit, and some negative toe, which also can help with turn in. The shock absorbers or the dampers, they're basically, you can't adjust the bump stiffness. So the compression of the shock, you can only adjust the rebound, which is when the shock is being pulled apart. And I've got it set up here pretty simply, as stiff as possible on the front and as soft as possible on the rear. That's really just to try and control the weight transfer on the throttle. Just kind of slow down the front to back weight transfer a hair as much as you can with these shocks. You can play with that a little bit. You might find a sweeter spot than that for you, but that's typically where I would run it here. You can, as you practice with this, do your laps. Do 10, 15, 20 laps. Just get the feel for the car. You might find that it's too loose for you, too tight for you. You can adjust in the car the weight jacker with buttons on your wheel or button box, or however you want to do it. Basically reducing the weight jacker reduces the cross weight, increasing the weight jacker increases the cross weight. So reducing the cross weight makes it looser, and increasing the cross weight makes it tighter. So you can make some small adjustments to that and maybe find your sweet spot. If you find your sweet spot, maybe you are finding that -6 is where you like it to be. It's a 53% cross weight, and that's what is most comfortable for you. You can always come back into the garage here, set your weight jacker at 0, and then adjust the rear shock collar offsets to get to 53. So then make that your new norm, and you can just do equal adjustments on both sides until you get to 53. You find here that the front went a little low when we did that, so we'll have to lift it up a hair to get it back legal again. But you can see how that now I'm at weight jacker 0 and the cross weight at 53 is my new sort of nominal that I can adjust from there in the car. So just make sure you adjust the shock collar offsets equally in order to adjust that cross weight. That way everything else stays more or less the same in the car. If you're finding, the next thing I guess you can do, if you're finding that's still not quite enough, um, or you want to make some bigger changes, you can change the spring rates. I mean, that's going to have the biggest impact on how the car handles. If you're finding the car is really tight, you may want to increase the rear spring rates. Going up on the right rear will loosen the car up for sure. If you find that the car is really loose, you could also increase the left rear. You could also increase the fronts if it's really loose. So it's kind of up to you to play with those. There's not a lot to play with. You can't go too far wrong. So just play with those, but you can always come back to this baseline and then tweak from there to get what you like on long runs. I'm hoping that these 100-lap races will go mostly green. We'll have some nice 40-50 lap runs. Rear end ratio, like any car, you want to set it to get your maximum acceleration. You can play with that if you want. If you're not getting off the corner well, maybe too much wheel spin, or you're really struggling, you can reduce this to a lower number, in the 3s, to kind of kill a little torque until you get comfortable with it. And as you gain throttle control, you can move this back. If you go any higher, the 443 or 460, you're probably going to hit the rev limiter chip on the straightaway, which isn't horrible. If you hit it just when you want to lift anyway, that's fine. 429 is kind of a nice compromise here. So that's basically it. The only other thing you might want to play with is your brake bias. I always set it as far back as I can at 50%, because I like to use the brakes to turn the car. So the first time you stomp on the brakes, you might find that it comes around on you because of that. And if that's too much for you, then you can always increase that front brake bias. But typically I'll run it at 50% in the race. So hopefully that helps you understand what's possible and what you can do. I think we can take the car out for a few laps, and I can show you the various lines around the track and when you might use those lines and why. So let's hop in here in the garage, or in the pits. First gear, it's only a 2-speed transmission. First gear is really only just to get it going out of the pits. You'll be in second gear before you get off pit road, and you'll never go back to first gear until you stopped again. So we get out here, get up to speed. This track is a little under 0.7 of a mile, 0.68, 0.69, something like that. So it's not a bad size short track. The typical high line, run up here above this seam what you see on my left, sort of in the third groove. You can run up there. It makes it kind of easy on the tires. A bit too slippery there. It makes it fairly easy on the tires. Not a lot of wheel input, and it makes anybody trying to pass you have to pass you low, which can be tricky. But you can run up here. Tend to get a better run off the corner than the guys on the low side, and you'll stay ahead of them. Of course, if you're trying to pass somebody up there, you're going to want to go to the middle. You're going to stick it in the middle here, in between the two seams. Just be careful when you come off the corner and you don't drift up into the guy on the outside of you. Or when you're going into the corner, you don't push up into them. One of the biggest mistakes people make here is to brake too late into the corners. It doesn't really benefit you that much to brake late, and you better to roll it in and be under control. There are times where maybe you're trying to pass lap traffic, strange things are going on, you need to go to the bottom. The bottom's tricky, it's pretty flat, not a huge amount of grip down here, but you can run the bottom. Again, same concerns coming off the corner. Make sure the car on the outside of you get up into it, and you got to be kind of careful on the exit because you tend to still have some wheel in the car. It makes it easy to spin. It gets a little bit slippery there, but you can run up there. So typically, though, you would run something, a hybrid of any of those. When you're single file in the race, you're probably going to run down the, high down the straightaway, dive into the second groove on the entrance, let it drift up to the outside, and come back, sort of diamond the corner. That tends to be the fastest way around the track. And I think most people will run that. It also, because you're using 2 lanes, it makes it a little trickier for somebody to pass you. So that's also a good thing. Yeah, you can go in, drift up to the high side. Obviously not drifting up into anybody else that's out there, and then back down. You can go to the bottom, do the same thing. You kind of drift up to the middle. You need to kind of try to do a semi-slide job on somebody. Just be careful. It's hard to make the slide job stick here, but you might be able to. So you can dive there and come off higher up. But typically this is your line in here, up to the top groove, back down to the second groove, and come off the corner, just like that. Minimal braking. Careful on the throttle when you're accelerating. The straighter you've got the wheel, the more you can accelerate. And that's really about it. I mean, as far as the ways around the track, you'll find you'll use all of those at some point during the race, most likely, as you're trying to sort of make passes, defend, lap traffic, whatever it might be. So just be aware that cars could be in any of those lanes. If you do decide to pit, and it's unlikely in a 100-lap race that you'll want to pit, but if you do need to for some reason, the pit entrance is here off just before turn 3. You have to get down to 40 mile an hour pretty quickly, and then just drive through to your pit. One thing with pit stops with this car, you don't want to add any fuel, so turn your fuel off. You do not want 75 gallons of fuel in the car. And because of the way they change the tires, as you'll see, they jack the front of the car up first and change the front tires, and then jack the rear up and change the rear tires. There's not really any time saved by just taking 2 outside tires. You can certainly take just 2 fronts or 2 rears and save some time, but that may not be exactly what you're looking for.
Go, go, go!
And that's it. I'd recommend you don't pit under green unless you're really have to because of your wreck or something. And also under yellow, it's touch and go as to whether you can stay on the lead lap if you're near the back of the queue. So most likely going to stay out for the whole race. That's all I've got. Hopefully that helps you guys, along with the setups that are in the baseline and driver sets. Get you up to speed a little bit quicker and maybe a little more safely. Good luck, and see you at Lucas Oil.